Hello, folks. Welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast. My name is Roy Bensby, and I'm your host. And I want to explain a little bit about the podcast before we start the show this week. This podcast is an opportunity for me to speak with some of the most interesting people I know that I can find on the internet. So, either with amazing talents or achievements or just unbelievable life stories or invaluable insights into areas that they have dedicated their lives to studying. I sit down with these amazing individuals from all across the world. Really, I've talked to people from Slovenia to the Czech Republic to Australia to countries in Africa and South America, really just all over the world. And I try to ask them the questions that will hopefully help you extract something valuable or learn something new or just get inspired by. And I do hope that you do get inspired by these talks with some sort of a call to action, maybe change something that you wanted to change for a while, or even just enjoy, detaching from the world for an hour and listening to some great conversations. So whatever it is that you get from this, I do hope that you extract something from it and enjoy the conversations. All these episodes are available on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google, and the rest of them. You can also find the episodes on my website, which is roybensv.com. You can find a lot of other information about me there as well, from photos to a little bit more insights into who I am, if you're interested. And, you can always go to social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me there. I'm pretty active on both those platforms, although the only ones I have. And I try to post regularly so you can stay up to date. And also be sure to put your email on the website. I shoot emails out with updates, news, any new current information that I have will be sent via those emails and social media platforms. So yeah, make sure you're in the loop. This week on the podcast, we have Austen Allred. Austen is an entrepreneur at heart. He is a Y Combinator alumni. And he's also the co-founder and CEO of Lambda School. And Lambda, what they do is, it's a coding school, online coding school, but they are very different, at least in their financial model, to a lot of other schools, especially to colleges that leave you in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. What they do is you don't have to pay anything up front, and they take a percentage of your income once you found a job in the space that you went to school for. So it's completely different, and we get into all of that. We go into the details. He really explains the ins and outs of Lambda, and yeah, he's just very open, very sincere, which is it's refreshing. Not a lot of people, especially heads of companies, are that open and that sincere and that honest about their company, about themselves. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure you guys will as well. We talk about remote work. We talk about remote learning and what the possibilities are in the future. We also talk about COVID, because how can you not talk about COVID during this time? And yeah, we get into, how he was raised, where he grew up, kind of the first businesses that he started. And yeah, I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. We ran into a few technical difficulties here and there, but nothing that some post-edit can solve. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode with Austen Allred. Enjoy, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Hey, Austen.
Hey,
How you doing?
good. How are you doing?
Not too bad, man. Are you enjoying the beautiful state of Utah? We talked a little bit before, and you told me that you were there.
Yeah, it's gorgeous right now. It's still moderately warm, so perfect weather, and we're down here in the Red Rocks in southern Utah. It's beautiful.
Okay, yeah, it's a beautiful. I've only been there once. I went skiing, Park City. It was amazing, but yeah, I know it's packed with like national parks, and yeah, it's a nice one.
Yeah, we're down here kind of by Zion, if anybody knows where that's at.
Oh, beautiful. And is that where you grew up?
I grew up actually closer to Park City than here, so a few hours to the north, but in Utah. So yeah.
All right. Did you
This is
take
kind of
advantage?
like this is like the Florida of Utah. So all the old people have a second home down here where they go for the winter.
Yeah. You're bringing the median age down.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, maybe tell us a little bit about, your upbringing. You just said from Utah, but were you always kind of a problem solver, always a creative type growing up?
Either a problem solver or a problem creator, depending on who you ask. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in a very traditional Utah family. Mormon, conservative, big family, 5 kids. And yeah, I mean, life was pretty simple. I was lucky enough that when I was so there are two things that I think were pretty formative growing up. One was that our parents basically made us earn every. So if I wanted to like play soccer in the rec league, I had to earn enough money to pay for that. If I wanted to buy clothes, I had to earn money to
Wow.
buy clothes. And
Wow.
you could weed the garden for $7 an hour, or you could figure it out on your own. So that I think that caused all of us to be a little entrepreneurial. And
Yeah.
the other thing is we're really lucky to be in a house where we got computers and the internet from a really young age. So basically, grew up online.
That's amazing. Yeah. Most kids don't grow up in that way. I
No,
feel like there's this, especially now with the younger generation, like everything is kind of handed to them. Where I feel like if you work for something, I don't know, it just A gets you more creative, B probably makes you appreciate things a little bit more when you're not, when it's just not handed to you.
yeah, I think so, and I think there's the other thing is an appreciation for the fact that like I mean, especially when you're young, getting a job isn't really an option, right? Like you can't like show up in an office and get paid decently well. So it's either miserable manual labor or it's you find a way to hustle.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, you give a 13-year-old the no expenses and the internet and everything you earn is play money. I mean, it's a powerful incentive.
Yeah. So prior to Lambda, what other businesses or ventures did you start?
I mean, I was so when I was really young, I figured out how to. So before PayPal had like security built in, I I opened an account under my mom's name, and then I transferred all the information to my information, and they didn't have a check to like see if that was legit, so I could act like an 18-year-old when I was 12, 13. Like I had a credit card, which I don't know
Yeah.
how that's even possible. I'll have their security features built in. I created an account as my mom and then moved all the information over to my name and everything. So, I had a credit card. I had everything that you could need to run a business and transact. And became a little eBay obsessed back when eBay was kind of what Amazon is today.
Yeah. And that's at 12.
Yeah, so I think I became an eBay power seller, which means you're selling a lot at like 13. And then kept buying and selling. When iPods were a thing, I'd buy and sell a lot of iPods. I'm not sure I was super profitable in doing that, but I sure did have a lot of iPods. So, um, which was the only important currency when I was 15.
Yeah.
Um, and then
Either that
ended
or
up,
sneakers, right?
yeah, exactly. There's only so much you can do. And a car was just so expensive, couldn't even imagine buying one. So that was the top. That was it. That was, that was the end of the line. Um, yeah, and then I mean, when I was a little bit older, started buying and selling Broadway tickets on eBay, and then that turned into a little company that did relatively well in single-digit $1 million of sales. Nothing too crazy. But when you're 18, that's super real.
Same.
So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, most 18-year-olds are earning what, $11 an hour or something. They're not doing single digit $1 million companies.
Well, so I was working on it with my uncle, who had started and sold another company, and I didn't have enough capital to buy a bunch of tickets and sell them or doing anything like that. So I was like, hey, I in school, I wrote this like 30-page business plan of, here's how you can buy and sell tickets profitably. He's like, okay, can I hire you for $14 an hour to do this? Or do you want equity? And I was like, oh, $14 an hour for sure. And that turned out to be a mistake, but what can you do?
You live and you learn, man.
Yeah.
And then I heard you funded your book through Kickstarter, right? And then you raised over 100K. How did you manage that?
I mean, so I had, I spent my entire life kind of learning about marketing and how growth works and stuff like that. And so I would, anytime I would do deep research on a topic, I would write an article about it. And those would get shared around, on Hacker News and Reddit and that kind of thing. And I had a sign up list on my, blog. So I had a couple thousand people signed up and was pretty good at marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was trying to run a startup and it wasn't working out, and I had a daughter in the hospital, so it was pretty much broke. Wow. And so I decided, I need to find a way to make some money quick. And I'd always thought about what would happen if I turned that into a book. There wasn't a publisher or anything. But so I threw up a Kickstarter and said, hey, here are the first 3 chapters of this book. They're, free. And if you want the next 8 chapters or whatever, I don't know what the numbers are. You can buy the book, or, here's the video package. Then I got a bunch of software you could bundle in. And yeah, we did like $60,000 on the first day. And that was life-changing, like literally.
Yeah.
At the point I was, I could save like $1,000 a month if we really scrimped and were meager. So that kind of changed everything.
Do you think that's your strongest suit, the marketing aspect?
I mean, that's my strongest skill set, just because that's what I've done the longest. And that comes pretty naturally to me. But, I don't run any of Lambda's marketing now because I don't have time to. I'm not as good as the people that I can hire. So it's,
Not everyone can be Elon Musk, huh?
No.
Just fire the whole PR department.
For so many different reasons, not all of us can be Elon Musk. Yeah.
I mean, it was a tweet that you put out today that I saw. There was a Vanity Fair, I think, article, and it was basically trying to be a hit piece on Elon, but inadvertently it showed how hilarious the guy is, and I actually liked. I was like, this is actually pretty good. It shows him in a good light, and that's probably not what they were going for. But there seems to be
look like a chill
guy.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. But there seems to be, and maybe this isn't really happening. Maybe I'm just noticing it, but I think it's becoming more prevalent. This clash of tech and media, and there's more and more kind of hit pieces on people in tech. And I don't know if it's quoting out of context or gotcha journalism or clickbait headlines. And I know you've experienced this a little bit personally as well. But why do you think that's kind of happening right now?
Yeah, I think the incentive model of journalism is kind of fading away. Like because of the internet, you don't make money the same way you used to. So there's way more access to all of the content. So I think journalists are just responding to the incentives placed before them. And the other thing is the ability to go direct is so intense now. Like, I can, like, if someone writes a hit piece about me, I have a bigger reach usually than whoever that journalist is. And thinking about like Vanity Fair, I checked this morning, like Vanity Fair has, 4 or 5 million followers on Twitter, and Elon has 40 million followers on Twitter. So Vanity Fair can say whatever they want, and Elon has the bigger reach still, which is not a dynamic that we're used to. We're used to, you have to ask the New York Times what is the right thing to say, and they will end up dominating the conversation. That's not true anymore. And I think that causes, because of, so you have both decreasing revenue and decreasing influence if you're a journalistic institution. And most of the influence is held by the people. So, think, we're seeing a lot of journalists move over to like a Substack like model, and they start getting paid more. And so you eliminate the overhead, and you eliminate, it's the top people in those publications are in effect carrying the bottom people in the publication who don't have as much reach, don't have as many readers. And it's kind of all leveling out into salaries. Whereas, you look at the Ben Thompsons of the world that say, hey, I'm going to go solo and write stratechery. You can make $1 million a year now. He probably makes more than that. And if you're, a reporter at the New York Times, you might make maybe a fourth of that, somewhere between a fourth and a tenth of that. So it's just all shifting in real time, and everyone's trying to figure it out.
Yeah, Andrew Sullivan, who just started recently writing for Substack, I think he said he's making about $500,000, whereas before he was probably making half of that in the New York Times.
Yeah, probably just doubled his salary, moving away from the New York Times, which is not something like, if you tell that to somebody 40 years ago, that does not compute. That's not a thing. And even in sports writing, there are now, publications like The Athletic that they're still like a publication, but it's very, they're kind of arbitraging and trying to pick off the top 10% of the people at newspapers or whatever else that have the big loyal following.
Yeah.
So it'll probably become more of an individual thing where a journalist sinks or swims by their own ability to create an audience, not based on the name of the publication they write for. And that's new. That's just a totally different world. And even 10 years ago, I don't think that was true.
No. And actually, I had a journalist on a few episodes ago, and I asked her a similar question. And whereas Twitter is the kind of the final editor nowadays, do you think we can see a model, a shift in the model of what journalism is like? Because I think there's more trust in individuals nowadays than in the corporation, right? There's not a lot of trust in CNN or MSNBC or Fox, et cetera, but there's trust in certain individuals. So could they just break off and, like you said, work on Substack or work on maybe other platforms or even just their own blog, and just we're going to get their news from them because we trust them?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're seeing that already. There's some modes of journalism that works really well for, and there's some that works less well for. Like, it's hard to be a single reporter and break the Watergate scandal open, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of reporters wish that they were doing on a day-to-day basis. It's, that we're still referring to it however many years later, because that doesn't happen very often.
With what we just kind of discussed, you've been pretty outspoken on certain issues with, mostly on Twitter. And it's not always the best recipe for success, although sometimes it is, as we see.
Much to the chagrin of the comms team. Yeah.
Yeah. But have you found that overall it helps you with your brand and who you are, or it hurts you, do you think?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I think people have a very binary response to a lot of the stuff that I tweet. The scary thing for me is, like, if you make somebody mad once, that might change their opinion of you forever. The trade-off is that, I had a conversation earlier with another founder earlier this week about, do you worry about kind of creating a cult following? Like, there's some people who are a little bit sycophantic and will just agree with whatever I say because it's what I say, right? Yeah. And that's a little bit scary. And so, I think Paul Graham gave me this mental model that is like, Paul Graham, the co-founder of Y Combinator, it's like the more followers you have, the more haters you're going to have, and they tend to grow in tandem with each other. But you don't notice the followers because they're just agreeing with you, and all sorts of people agree with you, especially if you have some position of any type of money or influence or Twitter followers or whatever. So you don't notice that, and you do notice all the people that get mad at you. And so assuming, and I think you can take that to extremes where it's probably unhealthy. Think about Donald Trump, right? Like, there are people who would do whatever he says, which is perhaps not ideal if you're a president. And there are people that hate the guy. At an insane degree.
Yeah.
And to a lesser extent, think of like Elon Musk, who we talked about earlier, right? Like he can put up a $72 pair of, or I guess a $69 pair of shorts and sell thousands of pairs and get $10 million that way. And there are a lot of people that just hate the guy. So I think where I net out is I would rather have people be either hot or cold instead of everybody being lukewarm or nobody caring, because that's where the business is. But the other mental model is from Naval Ravikant, who's like, you'd rather be rich and anonymous than poor and famous. I don't want to make it sound like I'm poor by any means, but my influence is probably greater than the amount of liquidity I have right now, for certain, which is a little bit precarious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, humans like to follow people. It doesn't matter if it's religion or it's sports or it's tech gurus or spiritual gurus. We want to be inspired by people, and everyone's inspired by different industries. And there are people, it's inevitable, that are just going to get obsessed with a person for good or bad, right? Doesn't matter if it's a celebrity or it's Elon Musk or even Tim Ferriss. He had a whole blog post about how people would just, wait outside his house or just find him in different places. And he's not it's not Brad Pitt. It's Tim Ferriss. Yeah. So there's always going to be those type of people. It's inevitable.
No, I've seen. Yeah, I mean, I'm not Tim Ferriss, right?
Yeah.
But I've seen enough of the pieces of that I deleted my Facebook, deleted my public Instagram. I now have like 100 Instagram followers, and they're people that I know really well. And it's a little bit weird when you start to go. We'd go on vacation, and people would recognize my kids on the street, and that's when I was like, oh shoot, that's not like that was not my design. And
yeah.
Yeah. And so even like a lot of places, I've changed out my face for a cartoon face. I don't think it'll make a difference. Like I'm not totally anonymous, but net, if I can have people not recognize me, I would prefer that. So it's not. I want influence without fame, and unfortunately, those things are coupled.
Let's talk a little bit about Lambda. Which is a coding school, but it is a different type of school. Maybe explain to people that don't know about Lambda a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so the high level Lambda is we train you to be a software engineer or data scientist in live online classes, and you don't pay tuition unless and until you get a job that pays you more than $50,000 a year. So $4,166 a month, basically. So the big difference there is twofold. The first is that you can start without having access to any money or credit or loans or whatever else. Like we don't do credit checks. We don't do a formal loan review process. I need to, for compliance sake, I do need to say, we do look at what your credit score is, but we're not using that in the decision-making process. Hopefully that keeps regulators happy. But the big difference is that it aligns the incentives of the school with the incentives of the student. So in most educational institutions, the school gets paid tuition, and it doesn't really have to care what happens after that, other than to market how successful students are. With us, if students aren't getting hired, we go out of business, and that forces us to think and act a little bit differently. Yeah.
So you guys essentially take on, because there was a piece in, I think it was The Verge, that said some things that when I read, I just didn't agree based on what I know. So you guys essentially take 100% of the risk, right? College leaves you with anywhere from $100,000 to $400,000 in debt. And Lambda, the model you guys have is you pay nothing up front, you get a job, you pay 17% of the earnings, capping at $30K, right? Mm-hmm. And then you guys have the income share agreement. Mm-hmm. Right? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So basically, from a student's perspective, once you get a job that pays more than $50,000 a year, you pay a percentage of your income for a couple of years. So 17% of your income for 2 years, capped at $30,000. So whether you've made 24 monthly payments first, or whether you've hit the $30,000 mark, at that point, it goes away. And there's 5 years of total deferment. So if you're below that income threshold for 5 years, then the entire thing goes away. So there's no like debt hanging over your head forever. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You do have to report your income for those 5 years because we don't want people to game the system, of course.
Yeah.
But it goes away, which is super, super different than student loans, of course. And then on the back end, we finance the ISAs in various ways. In some instances, people will look at, our historical outcomes and say, hey, I think, your income share agreements are worth X based on what your placement and repayments rates have been. And so we can make a trade that way. More recently, we've moved to where basically we borrow against the ISAs, or we effectively borrow. It's more complicated because we create an SPV and then we pool a bunch of ISAs and we underwrite those ISAs, and then we can get an advance on those ISAs. So technically the ISAs are sold to that SPV that we own. But for
SPV is what?
Single purpose vehicle. So basically another account or business that we own. I have to be careful and explain it for regulatory reasons so it's not deceptive. But effectively what that means is we get money against the ISA that we can use to train the student. It's not all of the cost of training a student. In fact, right now it's something like a fourth of the money, but that lets our venture capital go a little bit farther. And we have to pay it back plus interest. So we still hold the risk in that instance.
Yeah, because I would think initially you must have had a long period of time. If you're not selling the ISAs, you must have had a long period of time where you just saw no income, right? Because you get the first or second batch of students until they finish the courses, until they get the job, until they start paying back. Like that's a good chunk of time.
Yeah, I mean we've got 180 people on staff right now, right? And somebody has to pay those salaries. So venture capital is kind of how it starts. And then if you can get to the point where you can prove out that your ISAs are worth something, you can borrow or use those ISAs in another way to get a little bit of cash flow. But we're still, the risk of that is that, look, if it blew up and you were selling every ISA and didn't have to care, then that eliminates the notion of, being risk aligned with the students. That's not only impossible. I mean, we wouldn't do that, of course, but nobody would agree to that on the other side. Yeah. So it's not a thing, fortunately or unfortunately. I guess fortunately for everybody. Even if we were to sell ISAs, they still want us to have as much skin in the game as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you come up with the name Lambda?
So originally we were using kind of an esoteric programming language called Haskell. And Haskell uses something called the Lambda calculus. So originally we were teaching this I think it's a really powerful language, but it's a pretty small language. And then so we had the domain, we had the name, and we just kind of stuck with it.
Okay. And you went through Y Combinator, right?
Yeah, we did in 2017.
How helpful was that?
That was amazing. I obviously, if you can go through Y Combinator, just do it. The dilution that you take is like 7%, and the likelihood that you come out on the other side without YC having moved your company's value up 7% is zero.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer, but it was an incredible experience. Jeff Ralston and Daniel Gross were our partners at YC. And they were super helpful. And there were, 3 or 4 times during the course of YC when I think their advice totally changed our trajectory. So one of the examples is, we were a 6-month program at the time, and we're always toying with what the ideal length of Lambda School ought to be. And so I was like, all right, we can run 2 cohorts a year. And, we're going to run one cohort, July 2017, the next cohort, January 2018. And so we'll, by the end of 2018, we'll see how the first 20 students are doing. And that will be our sample size. And Jeff Ralston, who's now the something president of YC, I'm not sure what the titles are, but he's no longer just a partner. He's like, why don't you run a new cohort every month or, even every week? Like that feedback loop is way too long. And for some reason, because I started talking to physical schools where you have to get one batch of students out of the building to get the next batch of students in the building, it never clicked with me that you don't have that constraint. You can start cohorts every hour if you want to.
Yeah.
And so that little stuff like that seems obvious in retrospect was a huge shift in the company. We've learned way, way more than we would have otherwise. I mean, we would have been on our third cohort now. And instead we're on our 150th. So
Jesus.
Big difference. Yeah.
Big difference. Yeah. And can anyone join? Is there some sort of a rigorous application process? Do you have to have some sort of basics in coding, or is it just up for anyone?
Yeah, you don't need to have any experience or any credentials. But we try to, as quickly as we can, get a sense of how hard you'll work and how smart you are, basically. And we make all of our decision process based on that. There's a little bit of secret sauce in how we do that.
Yeah.
But it's actually pretty cool. It's pretty egalitarian. It's pretty fair as in any admissions process can be. And we don't care about who your parents are. We don't care about how much money you have. We don't care about what your resume looks like. We're just looking for potential.
So, walk me through this. What's the downside? It seems it's a win-win for everyone. I just don't understand why there's hate for this. I albeit little, but it just seems like it's a great leveler for people that maybe aren't in a big city or don't have the opportunity to go to a major school or the money to go to Ivy League or whatever it is. You're not bound by geographic location. It affords the same opportunity for everyone. You're not in debt. It's a win-win-win.
Yeah, the downsides are, if you can figure out how to become a software engineer for free, this is definitely more expensive.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily cheap. I think it's still cheap relative to a lot of universities, but it's not cheap. The difference is you only pay if it works. And in an ideal scenario, you're making so much money that you don't care. And almost all of our students are, including paying tuition, net positive, plus a way better career trajectory. The downsides are, if you put a lot of time and effort into it and it doesn't work, you still put that time and effort into it. There's no way for us to absolve you of that.
Yeah.
And that, that can be frustrating. That happens relatively rarely, but it certainly happens, right? We can't yet guarantee that every student who goes to steps foot in Lambda School gets a 6-figure job.
Yeah.
And you can debate how much of that is on the student and how much is on Lambda. I think, that's the scenario that we try to avoid, not only because it's the right thing to avoid, but because, we'd spend tens of thousands of dollars training people and then we're going to get zero back. I would prefer to not do that. And then let's see, what are the other downsides? So I think it's really those two. If it works and you could have gotten there without spending any money, then it's going to be more expensive. I think everybody understands that coming in.
Yeah.
And if you're not successful, then you don't have to pay tuition and we lose a bunch of money, but you lose a bunch of time and that sucks and nobody likes that.
Yeah. And I mean, if you go to college and you pick a major, I don't know what the statistics are, but not 100% of the people are going to work in whatever field that they went to college in. It's probably pretty low.
Our statistics crush any university by a wide margin. And not to mention the fact that the people who aren't successful don't pay us anything, right? If you look at a school that has a 75% graduation rate and a 75% hiring rate within the field you studied, that's a really successful school.
Yeah.
We do the math on that, and of the people who've paid tuition, it's 50% of them were successful. And the school gets paid for 100%, even if the 50% are only successful. Lambda only gets paid for the 50%. So it's a much better system of education. But people are thinking about, like, they're comparing us oftentimes against a utopian ideal that doesn't exist instead of against, an education system that does.
Yeah.
And that's often, the pushback is, well, why can't you do it this way? Or, why isn't it just free for everybody? It's like, I wish it could be. Like, I'd be thrilled for that. But someone has to pay instructor salaries. Someone has to pay for the software. Someone has to pay for our placement teams. Someone has to pay for the career coaches. If you know of a way to automate all of that and make it cost zero, please let me know, because I will buy it.
And even off of that, someone will make money somehow. It's just, there's just got to be a process where people can make money. You don't have to bankrupt other people, but there's just got to be a way where everyone can stay fed.
Yeah, I think the average person gets that, right?
Yeah.
The other criticism is that somehow what we're doing is indentured servitude, which makes zero sense, because you only have, it's the tricky thing in the financial space is this a loan, or is it ownership of people? And like it's really neither. It's kind of in between those things. It really has the best pieces of the loan with the forgiveness of, if it doesn't work out, you don't have to pay. But you could create an income share agreement with the loan. It would just be the most forgiving loan of all time. So we may end up moving that direction just for clarity. Like, look, it's a $30,000 loan, but if you make 24 payments, then we'll forgive the rest. And if you don't get a job, we'll forgive it. And, in all these instances, you don't have to pay anything. The tricky part is there in the United States, if you forgive a loan, that is income on your income taxes. So we don't want to, give you a $30,000 loan and forgive it, because then you have to pay taxes on that, which is no fun.
All right. Quick word from our sponsors. Guys, do you like drinking coffee as much as I do? I hope you do. But do you also like helping people in need? I'm assuming you do, because my listeners are good people. And Free Lunch Coffee, the company I teamed up with, just simplify that whole process for you. It's an amazing brand with an amazing message. And what they do is, when you buy one bag of coffee, they provide 10 meals to children in the schools of South Africa. They give away 50% of the money they make to end hunger in the lives of young children. And their coffee is just first class, organically grown, fair trade, premium grade coffee beans. So you're guaranteed deliciousness with every sip. Really, it's an amazing brand, and you should get behind them, just as I have. And it's super easy. You just go online. And if you don't like it, which I don't see why you wouldn't, but if you don't for some reason, 100% money back guaranteed within 30 days. So it's a win-win-win. It's a win for everyone. So just go to the website, punch in genuinely, and you will get a 10% discount at freelunchcoffee.com. Again, freelunchcoffee.com. Guys, it is a season of giving. So like I said, win-win. You get coffee, children in need get food, and the company can continue to do this and help people around the world. So freelunchcoffee.com. Back to the show. So transitioning from the brick and mortar college to online.
I think brick and mortar will never totally go away, but I think there was even until a year ago, people were saying that stuff that is now online would never work online. So the question now is, how much of it shifts back? I think there will probably still be a college system of 4-year degrees where you go physically in person, but it will be a fraction of the people who are going now will take that path, because there's so many other paths available. I think the 4-year degree kind of traditional academia does make sense for maybe a fourth of the people that are currently going to college, but it's certainly not everybody. So that will shift, I think.
And there's I personally don't have kids, but pretty much all my friends have kids, and where I live, all the neighbors do as well. And I hear that kids with learning difficulties, are having a really difficult time this year specifically.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just, I started to think because when I was growing up, I definitely had learning difficulties like ADD, couldn't, stay focused. And I was thinking like, if I had to be in this situation today when I'm a 13 or 14-year-old and I had to be on Zoom with the phones and all the distractions, like forget about it, impossible. Right. And I was thinking, is the one-on-one tutor irreplaceable, or could there be maybe a new platform that would specifically focus on kids with learning disabilities that are maybe suffering a little extra this year?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we have, like, this is one of those times where I think there's so much history of, when my wife was an elementary school teacher, it was, she was the teacher and we're in Utah, so there are 30 kids and, everybody's trying to figure it out together. And there are new models that are different ratios or different groups of kids and all sorts of new stuff. And, some people look at that and say, oh, the special needs kids might be disadvantaged in this new world. And that may be true, right? I don't fully know. I'd imagine that if you're a special needs kid, it's way more difficult to learn online.
Yeah.
And it may be that if you're a kid who, there might be some people who thrive and excel in that environment. And so what I hope we get to is that kind of just better matching for which style is best for which individual. I mean, like in my high school, there are, kids who had Down syndrome, and Zoom does not work for that, right? Yeah. Like it just doesn't.
Yeah.
But there are also people who sat in classes and slept through the day because it wasn't engaging and it wasn't what they wanted, and what they wanted wasn't at our school. Yeah. So I hope that over time, we can find the right fit for all of the types. Right now, what we have is one size fits all. And I don't even know if it's one size fits most. I got to think back to my high school class of like how many of the students were engaged and learning. Like I think half would be generous in a lot of places.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're also kind of figuring shit out this year, right? Like this has been a very experimental year for everyone, very difficult year for everyone. And everyone's just trying to figure out, parents are working from home. They're trying to figure out how to manage the kids. The kids are studying from home. They're trying to figure out, the teachers are teaching from their house. They're trying to, everyone's just trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the good news is there's a lot of experimentation. The bad, I think that will net be good in the long run. But it means there's a lot to figure out in the meantime.
Yeah. Are you guys working remote, all the team?
Yeah. So we've always had about half of the team be remote. Mm-hmm. And then all the students have always been remote. So it was a really easy transition for us. I'm sure we'll have places for people to work out of when that's an option again. Because we've got people in San Francisco that have 2 kids and 2 adults in a 700 square foot studio, and it didn't matter before because everybody went to school and work, and you just kind of came home to eat and sleep. And now 2 kids trying to go to school and both kids trying to work, and it's tough.
It's tough,
and I don't know what the answer is right now. Like, I talk with some folks like, yeah, I'm in a difficult position because of X, Y, Z, and it's like, I don't know what to do. Like, it just sucks.
Yeah. I think at the beginning of the year, everyone was like, fuck yeah, like working from home, this is great. Like I don't have to commute and I'm just sitting with my coffee in the backyard. But I think now, if you were to poll people, I don't know if they would have, probably some people would still love to keep doing the remote work. But I think I think the poll would show that a lot of people are kind of missing, not necessarily the office, but just socializing with their fellow coworkers, going somewhere, leaving the house. I think people kind of miss it.
No, and I think we had a hybrid culture before where we had people who were in the office and people who were remote. And if you are intentionally being remote, you structure your life very differently, right? You have social groups outside of work. You have, like, you don't rely on that same kind of work infrastructure. Whereas, the people who are in the, like, being forced to be remote sucks in most instances, right? It's not fun. Choosing to be remote, you can build your life a different way, and you have to be very intentional about it. I would guess it's 50-50 of who would prefer to go back and who wouldn't, of the people who can now take their pick and at some magical point in the future in which there's a vaccine or whatever, but we're not even in that world yet. But yeah, I don't think remote work is panacea if you haven't built your life around it that way. I miss the office for sure. I miss my routine of going to the gym and going to the office, and I don't miss the commute. I spend way more time with my family now, so they're trade-offs. And we're building our life a little bit differently now that we're remote than when we were in downtown San Francisco.
Yeah. Do you think is the status quo moving forward going to be this? Is it going to be once we have a vaccine, boom, everyone's back to office and brick and mortar? Or is it going to, like you said, going to be a hybrid, a little bit of this, a little bit of that?
I think it'll be more of a hybrid. Definitely not everybody will shift back. And there are some companies that have, for the first couple of months, everybody was like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. So maybe this will be a couple months and we'll wait it out and then we'll be back in the office. And then everyone was kind of looking for certainty. Like, we had a bunch of staff be like, hey, so I moved to San Francisco and I'm paying $4,000 a month in rent for this job. If I don't need to be in San Francisco, like, I'm still happy to work here, but I'm not going to be in San Francisco. And we were certainly not the only company that saw that. So I don't think everybody will shift back to in-person. I don't think, there will never be companies that go to the office again. I think it'll be somewhere in between. I think the scale tips toward remote for a couple of reasons. The first is just that you can recruit a wider variety of people, and that, I think the pros of that may start to outweigh the cons.
Yeah.
But there are certainly people who there are people on Lambda's staff that are super extroverted and love working out of the office, and this kind of sucks for them. And I get that.
Yeah. It's also economics, right? If you don't have to rent an office space with all the amenities that come with that, with the catering, with, everything on top, that's a huge expense off your back.
Totally. Not to mention, if you're a Bay Area startup, people will work for way less outside of San Francisco than they will work inside of San Francisco. So you can have your viewpoint on whether everybody should be paid San Francisco salaries, but I think the San Francisco market is very different than the US market, which is very different than the global market, and you'll find different efficiencies in all those places.
Was there something that surprised you this year? And I know everything surprised you, but on the flip side, was there something, once COVID hit, everyone had their expectations and projections and predictions, what's going to happen this year. And I'm just wondering if there's something that you kind of, when COVID hit, you're like, I think this is what's going to happen. And actually maybe the opposite of that happened, or just, you were just, that wasn't what you expected to happen.
Yeah. This will probably not be a popular answer, but it's not as bad as I had anticipated, actually.
Not popular.
Yeah, that's not a very cool thing to say, but I was expecting something way worse for a while. And the case count basically followed. I was just doing math on it, right? Hey, the growth rate looks like this. Who knows how much testing is or is not being done? That's, really difficult to measure. But based on the virality that we were seeing and the death rate, I would have guessed there was, 10 times as much death. And I'm really glad that I was wrong, to be clear. Yeah. I'll be wrong all day. And it's still really nasty. But it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. That makes it sound like I'm hand waving about it. It's still awful. It's just, I was anticipating something even worse.
Yeah. for me, the part that annoys me is how hypocritical everyone is and how political this thing has become.
I can't stand that.
That
Like,
drives me insane.
how masks became a political issue is like, we should figure out what causes that and undo whatever that is, because that's the stupidest thing ever. And how, like, whether, and like, for a while there, you couldn't suggest that anything should be, like, it was, if you want to suggest that maybe schools should be open, you were like an evil person. And I don't even know what the right answer is there, but like, this is a complex, complicated situation. And I still don't know what the right answer is. Because there's just so many trade-offs, and where you lie on what the right trade-off is pretty individual, and it's tricky. But there's way too much extremism, I think, on all sides.
Yeah, what bothers me is that depending on what side of the political aisle you stand, it's okay to go on a parade or on some sort of gatherings in the streets in the tens of thousands. If you're on the left or the right, if it's a rally on the right, if it's some sort of gathering on the left, then it's fine. And then the news media is okay. But then once the other side does it, oh my God, it's horrific. What are they doing? This is a super spreader. And there's just so much hypocrisy. But then if there's a restaurant with 5 people inside, they shut it down and they fine them. Meanwhile, these poor people, they're just trying to make a living. They're trying to, keep their family with food on the table. So that whole part just really rubs me the wrong way. Like, I don't understand why you're shutting down these small businesses that are just trying to make a living. Really, they're not super spreaders. They're not doing anything. And honestly, like, I'm seeing here, like, specifically in Connecticut, I don't know how it is in other states, but, everyone has masks on. They're sitting, they just space the tables apart. And it's fine. It's really fine. Like, you don't have to shut down these businesses. Like, it's like shutting down these businesses is worse than getting COVID. Like, I don't know if that's controversial or not, but like, if you have to shut down your business, something you invested your money in, something that brings money to feed your family, versus getting. And I had COVID. I was one of the first. I don't know, one of the first, but I got it early on in March in New York. And it was a really shitty week, and then it was done, So yeah,
I'm definitely going to sidestep which is better or worse. But yeah, I think the reality is there are trade-offs that are difficult to legislate and different for each person, and of which you would prefer, right? And like, the reality is that there's not a winning answer where it's like, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Everybody's happy. Everything goes away. Like, shutting down businesses is awful, and people getting sick is awful. And like, there's no clear win. So it's just trying to limit the amount of damage. And look, I think, the data seems to point to the fact that in the United States, like, we're not going to kill the virus by, it's just going to rip through everything, I think, at this point. I don't, it's vaccine or herd immunity. There's not like we, like has happened in a few countries where like, it's just, we suppressed it enough that there's very few cases. Like, I think we're past that point now.
No, it's like wildfire.
Yeah, just the math of it. I don't know how you'd come back from it. So I'm, it looks like we figured out how to limit the deaths a lot more, which is a good thing. And outside of that, I think it's just ripping through, and I don't know what we can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's like I said earlier, it's a rough year for everyone. Everyone has their opinions. I don't think anyone's has solutions, although there are a few countries that have done extremely well with very low amount of infections, very low death rates. I don't know if it's impossible to copy what they've done, maybe because they're smaller countries.
We certainly we acted too slowly. And the tricky thing about Americans is you can tell them to do whatever you want to tell them. They're not necessarily going to do it.
Freedom.
Yeah. There are pluses, and I mean, there are a lot of pluses to freedom. There are some minuses, and that's one of the minuses is like, I'm glad that we don't have a totalitarian regime that can tell us exactly what we do and we have to follow it to the letter of the law. The minus is that if you tell people to wear masks and social distance, some of them are just not gonna. So yeah.
Well, there's just such a distrust in government that it goes into conspiracy theories so quickly here. And with again, social media, QAnon, I don't know, Reddit, it spreads like wildfire as well. And then people just don't want to listen to reason. They'll try to find some conspiracy that lizard people are, I don't know. It's all very ridiculous at times. Even if
the fact that like the marching orders from the World Health Organization in the beginning were don't wear a mask.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't help you, which is like, I mean, we almost forgot about that. But I remember, checking Twitter when everybody was saying, don't buy a mask. Nobody needs masks. They don't do anything. We just pretend like that never happened now, I guess, which is another interesting phenomenon. But yeah, it's complex and nuanced, and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, same here, man. So I like to close out, hopefully, with some sort of a positive message. So I know that you had a business prior to Lambda, and you guys were very close to closing a series round. And last minute, something didn't work out. You got a phone call saying, "Hey, like we're actually not going to fund you guys." Which that's not the positive. That sucks. But was there something positive that came out of that? Some sort of a lesson that you learned?
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of lessons. One was, it's never done until money is in the bank. So all of my subsequent fundraising rounds, I've acted very differently than I did during that one, to put it mildly. And then I think, I remember after that business failed, driving around, like you see the guy at the golf course picking up golf balls and being like, am I capable of doing that? Like the level of self-doubt was pretty extreme. But I think my net takeaway is like nothing is ever as bad as it seems in the moment, and stuff can really suck, but you'll figure out a way to work through it, and it'll all work out. I get in trouble for saying stuff like it'll all work out as well, because what if you have cancer and you die? But I actually, I'm optimistic enough that I believe, things are not as bad as they seem, and the more we learn to reckon with those things, the better off we are. So,
yeah, mindset is everything.
Yeah, agreed.
Austen, you're awesome, man. I really appreciate. This was great, and I think people are really attracted to you because of your sincerity. So that's one thing that keep that. Just always keep that. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. It was good chatting.
Man. All right, we'll be in touch, man. Thanks again.